You know the story. Yellow brick road, ruby slippers, emerald city, and a wizard hiding behind a curtain. It's been filed away in our collective memory since 1939 as innocent children's fantasy, pure escapism with singing munchkins and flying monkeys. Except it was never written for children. The Wizard of Oz is actually a coded financial allegory published in 1900 at the peak of America's greatest monetary crisis. It's a deliberate warning about dishonest money, systemic extraction, and illusions masquerading as prosperity. Every character represents a piece of the economy, every location symbolizes a financial structure, and every detail was intentionally crafted with meaning. Here's what they didn't tell you in school. In L. Frank Baum's original book, Dorothy's slippers weren't ruby red. They were silver. The yellow brick road wasn't whimsical fantasy, it represented gold. The Emerald City wasn't real prosperity, it was an illusion created by forcing every citizen to wear green-tinted glasses. Remove those glasses and the city becomes ordinary, because the green was always fake. Baum encoded a sophisticated warning about currency debasement, wealth extraction mechanisms, the darkness of the financial elites, and how a nation built on freedom gets gradually shackled by debt and monetary manipulation. Then Hollywood buried that entire message in 1939 by changing one critical detail. They removed silver from the story. During the same decade, the government removed gold from your hands. Over a century later, Baum's warning is more relevant now than when he first wrote it. Let me explain exactly what he was revealing and why understanding this allegory might be the most important financial education you never received. In 1900, the United States operated on the gold standard, which meant every paper dollar was supposedly backed by physical gold sitting in treasury vaults. That sounds honest and stable on the surface, but it was systematically destroying working Americans through a mechanism most people didn't understand. Here's how it worked. Because gold supply was limited, the money supply was also limited. As the economy grew and population expanded, there wasn't enough currency circulating through the system. The result was deflation. Prices kept falling. That sounds beneficial until you understand the brutal debt dynamics it created. A farmer would borrow money to plant crops when wheat was selling for $5 per bushel. Then market prices would drop to $3 per bushel due to deflation. But that farmer still owed the principal plus interest that had been calculated based on $5 wheat prices. Same debt obligation, but dramatically reduced income, which meant far more labor was required to repay the identical obligation. This wasn't just economic theory. From 1880 to 1896, the price level in the entire US economy fell by 23%. Credit completely dried up as banks stopped lending, and working families couldn't access the capital they needed to survive. The gold standard created a deflationary spiral that enriched the wealthy who held gold while systematically bankrupting everyone who actually produced things. A massive political movement emerged called the populists, and they demanded free silver, adding silver to the monetary backing to expand the money supply and provide relief to working Americans. They weren't advocating abandoning hard money entirely, just augmenting it through bimetallism. Gold plus silver operating together as a dual standard to loosen the stranglehold on credit. This became the central political battle of 1896. At the Democratic National Convention, William Jennings Bryan delivered his famous Cross of Gold speech, declaring that, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." He electrified crowds and directly challenged the banking establishment, but he lost the election anyway. Republican candidate William McKinley won, and the United States formally adopted the gold-only standard in 1900 with the Gold Standard Act. Banking interests crushed the silver movement completely, and the working class lost everything they'd fought for. Right in the middle of this monetary war, Baum published his book. Historian Henry Littlefield argued in 1964 that The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was fundamentally a Midwesterner's vibrant and ironic portrait of America as it entered the 20th century, and specifically functioned as a metaphor for the populist movement and a direct critique of national debates over monetary policy. Every character, every symbol, every location, it's all a political parable about money, power, and who gets to control both. who each character actually represents. The Scarecrow believes he has no brain, yet throughout the entire story he solves problems, creates strategies, and demonstrates clear intelligence. He represents the American farmer who's been manipulated into a terrible sense of inferiority and self-doubt, crushed by debt, starved of credit access, and made to believe they were too uneducated to understand the financial system that was bankrupting them. The reality? These farmers fed the entire nation and understood perfectly well that the system was rigged against them. But the financial elites, the wizards controlling everything, made them feel powerless and doubt their own intelligence. The Tin Man stands rusted and motionless, completely forgotten, until Dorothy oils his joints and brings him back to life. He represents the industrial worker, the factory laborer who has been systematically dehumanized and turned into a machine. When the economy crashed, these workers were simply discarded and left to rust with no work and no voice in the system. He says he needs a heart, but he already has one. He just can't feel it anymore after what the system has done to him. That's the brutal reality of how the economic structure made workers believe they were nothing but disposable tools while extracting all their labor. The Cowardly Lion represents William Jennings Bryan himself, the populist Democratic nominee in the 1896, 1900, and 1908 elections. He was loud, roaring, and delivered passionate oratory that brought down convention halls with his cross of gold speech. But when push came to shove, he lost all 3 presidential elections to Republican candidates. He promised transformative change, but never delivered, becoming a symbol of failed leadership and courage that faltered exactly when action mattered most. Dorothy represents the everyman, honest, innocent, just trying to get home to stability, security, and peace. She doesn't care about complex monetary policy debates, she just wants to survive. That vulnerability and apolitical stance makes ordinary people easy to manipulate and easy to control by those who understand how the system actually works. And the wizard himself is the central banker, the financial elite, the government controller who hides behind a curtain and projects power through fire and smoke. Once admitted to the Emerald City, the wizard tells the group that in this country, everyone must pay for everything he gets. Pull back that curtain and what do you find? Just an ordinary man with no actual magical powers. A manipulator using elaborate illusion to maintain control over everyone who believes in his authority. Once Dorothy sees the truth and understands who's really in charge, everything changes. The power was never his in the first place. It was always an illusion that she was forced to believe in. The journey and its monetary symbolism. Dorothy walks down a yellow brick road made of gold while wearing silver slippers, not ruby red ones. Hollywood changed that detail in 1939, and in doing so, they completely erased the entire monetary allegory from popular consciousness. Silver slippers on a golden road represents the populist solution. You walk the path of gold because you don't completely abandon hard money, but you do it with silver on your feet. That's bimetallism, a dual standard creating balance between scarce gold controlled by banks and more abundant silver that could expand credit for working families. That was the actual political fight. Despite Bryan's alliance with populists and his soaring oratory, he was defeated by McKinley, and the gold-only standard remained in place. The elites crushed the movement, silver was suppressed, and the working class lost completely. Then there's the Emerald City itself, this glorious capital of Oz where everything appears green and prosperity seems to be everywhere, dazzling the eye with wealth. Except it's all an illusion. In the book, everything in the city appears green, only because everyone is forced to wear green-colored spectacles. Remove those glasses, and the city becomes ordinary, because the green was always fake, and the prosperity was manufactured perception. That's what fiat currency is. Money by agreement and collective belief. It's an illusion of prosperity when the entire system runs on nothing but confidence and deception. Value exists only because you're forced to believe it exists. Remove that belief, pull back those glasses, and the whole system collapses instantly. Before Dorothy and her friends can even enter the Emerald City, they're ordered to wear those green-colored spectacles. which symbolizes how conservative financiers force citizens to look at the entire world through money-colored lenses. Just like today, where the dollar is backed by nothing tangible. Inflation erodes your savings continuously, and value depends entirely on collective faith in institutions that systematically break that faith. The wizard maintains this illusion through pure spectacle, fire, smoke, and fear. He controls the population through intimidation and deception, as the central banker nobody voted for, the policymaker operating in shadows. Pull back the curtain, and all that projected authority vanishes immediately. Baum wasn't writing simple entertainment for children. He encoded a sophisticated warning about how money becomes magical, not because it actually works, but because citizens are coerced into believing it does. Once you see the mechanism clearly, you can never unsee it. How Hollywood buried the message. In 1939, MGM adapted the book and made one change that destroyed the entire allegory. They turned the silver slippers ruby red. The official reason given was that Technicolor had just emerged as a technology, and red looked better on screen, making it cinematically superior and visually striking. But the real effect was that it stripped away the monetary metaphor completely. Silver vanished from the story, and with it, the solution, bimetallism, expanded money supply, relief for debt-crushed workers, was erased from collective memory. What remained was just a musical fantasy, children's entertainment, and innocent escapism with no deeper meaning. The timing reveals either intent or an extraordinary coincidence. By 1939, something critical had already happened to American money. On April 5, 1933, Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102, forbidding the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates within the continental United States. All citizens were required to deliver their gold to the Federal Reserve by May 1, 1933, in exchange for $20.67 per troy ounce. Violation was punishable by a fine up to $10,000 or 10 years in prison or both. Then what happened next? Soon after forcing this surrender, Roosevelt raised the official price of gold from $20.67 to $35 per ounce, devaluing the dollar by 58% in a single day. The government forced you to surrender gold at the lower price, then immediately revalued it higher. You absorbed the entire loss, while banks absorbed all the gain. Hollywood released a film that removed silver from the story. During the exact same decade, the government removed gold from your possession. The population lost access to both precious metals and lost understanding of what money was actually supposed to be. What remained was just paper backed by nothing but government decree. Did Hollywood bury the message intentionally? We can't know for certain, but the effect is identical regardless. Multiple generations grew up knowing only the film version, with ruby slippers, musical numbers, and Technicolor fantasy. Nobody learned about the most brilliant financial allegory ever written, and nobody understood that Baum had encoded a warning about the exact system operating today. Why this matters right now. This isn't ancient history, it's an ongoing mechanism. The same forces, the same extraction methods, the same fundamental illusions. The methods have evolved and become more sophisticated, but the underlying principle remains identical. We've replaced real value with debt, swapped savings for speculation, and the system breaks faster now while generating more illusions to maintain belief. They tell you inflation is transitory, the economy is strong, and everything is under control. But behind the curtain, you'll find record deficits, manipulated interest rates, vanishing purchasing power, enormous national debt, and a population squeezed by backroom deals and shadow policies. Nobody voted for the Federal Reserve, and nobody elected the central bankers, yet they determine your purchasing power through inflation targeting that deliberately destroys savings by design. The gold standard crushed workers through deflation where prices fell, but debt obligations didn't decrease. Today's system crushes through inflation where purchasing power evaporates, but debt expands continuously. The mechanism has been inverted, but the effect is identical. Wealth gets extracted from producers and transferred to those controlling the money supply. Baum wrote about a system where the wizard controlled money, controlled perception, and controlled the population through illusion enforced by making everyone wear tinted glasses. That system never actually ended. It just became more sophisticated, more invisible, and more total in its reach. Central banks now operate openly in the shadows with a stated 2% inflation target, which means your savings lose value by deliberate design, not accident. This is documented policy, publicly announced, and defended as economically necessary. They're telling you the plan while actively executing it. You're told to put on the green glasses, believe in the Emerald City, not look behind the curtain, keep walking the yellow brick road they paved for you, trust the wizard, surrender your agency, and accept monetary debasement as inevitable. The way out. At the end of the story, Dorothy learns the critical truth that changes everything. She always had the power within herself. It wasn't in the wizard, wasn't in the city, and wasn't in the elaborate illusion. It was already within her the entire time. The silver shoes were the solution, always there from the beginning. She could click her heels together and escape whenever she wanted. Silver was the way out, the way home, and bimetallism was the answer to debt slavery under the gold-only standard. Today, the parallel still holds perfectly. The system isn't fair, isn't sustainable, and isn't designed for you to win. But that doesn't mean you're helpless or without options. You need to think differently about money and understand how inflation systematically robs you while they euphemistically call it monetary policy. Learn the fundamental difference between real assets, things that cannot be printed, debased, or inflated away, and paper promises that are denominated in deliberately weakening currency. Silver and gold still exist as stores of value. Hard assets still exist. Bitcoin exists as a perfectly scarce digital asset operating outside their control. Alternatives to the wizard's fiat illusion exist right now, and you don't need anyone's permission or approval. You just need to see the truth clearly. Once you see behind the curtain, you realize the power to protect yourself was yours all along. Not necessarily to beat the entire system, but to exist outside it, to hold assets they cannot debase, and to opt out of the forced wealth transfer that happens through monetary manipulation. The yellow brick road is a warning, not a promise. If you blindly follow the path they've paved for you, you may never actually make it home. They're walking on gold themselves while telling you to hold paper. That's not an accident. That's by design. The pattern repeating. The wizard was never real, and the system was always built on illusion. A system where your savings systematically shrink, dollars buy less every year, and your entire future depends on debt you never chose to take on. Baum encoded a warning about monetary deception and control. Hollywood erased it by changing silver slippers to ruby. That erasure wasn't just aesthetic, it was ideological. They removed the solution from the story the same way government removed real money from the economy. Executive Order 6102 forced gold confiscation in 1933, requiring citizens to surrender at $20.67 per ounce before government immediately revalued it to $35. Private gold ownership remained banned until 1974, when Gerald Ford finally repealed the order. That's 41 years where two entire generations grew up never experiencing any form of monetary freedom. The film was released in 1939 with silver removed from the allegory and the message completely buried. The population learned only the fantasy version with musical entertainment, and nobody understood they were watching a warning about their own economic system. You're walking the yellow brick road right now, a gold standard for elites who own appreciating assets, but paper promises for everyone else. The Emerald City is still glowing, the wizard is still projecting power, and the green glasses remain mandatory. But once you see it clearly, once you truly understand the allegory, you can't unsee it. The glasses come off, the illusion breaks, and you realize the answer was never with them. It was always with you. Central bank digital currencies aren't improving banking, they're completing the control architecture Baum warned about over a century ago. Programmable money with built-in expiration, transaction restrictions, geographic limits, and social credit integration. The Wizard of Oz wasn't prophecy, it was pattern recognition. It identified the same mechanism governments have always used: create an illusion of prosperity, force the population to see through tinted lenses, extract wealth while projecting benevolence, and maintain control through spectacle and misdirection. Don't follow their yellow brick road. find your own way home. If this showed you a system you didn't know existed and revealed how a children's book from 1900 encoded a warning about monetary control that's operating right now, you have a decision to make. Subscribe if you want to understand the mechanisms determining your wealth position before this infrastructure becomes permanent. Every week I break down the systems most analysis completely ignores, the illusions, the control mechanisms, and the ways out that still exist. This isn't entertainment, this is preparation, and the window is narrowing. See you in the next one.